While they were preparing the sandwiches, Sophia asked questions Ricardo had never considered before. "Daddy, why do we have such a big house just for the two of us?" she asked. The question made Ricardo stop what he was doing. He looked around the spacious kitchen, thought about the 4 rarely used bedrooms, the formal living room they never entered, and the huge backyard they barely used. "Well, I guess I bought this house thinking we'd need the space," he answered honestly. "Space for what?" Sophia continued with the relentless logic of children. "For a bigger family, I suppose. When your mother was alive, we thought about having more kids," Ricardo admitted, feeling the old pain of loss. "And now? Are we going to have more space than we need forever?" Sophia asked. Ricardo realized it was a deep question. His whole life, he had accumulated things, a big house, an expensive car, designer clothes, as symbols of success. But what was the point of it all if it didn't make a difference to anyone but him? "You know, Sophia, I think you're right. We have too much space," he said thoughtfully. "Maybe we could use that space in ways that help other people." "How?" Sophia asked, excited. "Well, we could talk to Thomas about giving lessons here. We could invite Marcus to come take a shower and wash his clothes whenever he needs. We could use our big kitchen to prepare meals for more people," Ricardo suggested, surprised by his own words. Sophia jumped with joy. "Yes! Our house could be like Mrs. Chen's bakery, but for people instead of bread." Ricardo laughed at the comparison, but there was truth in it. What good was having so much if he could be sharing it instead? As they finished making the sandwiches, Ricardo opened the refrigerator and looked inside. It was packed with expensive food. Imported cheeses, premium meats, organic vegetables, gourmet desserts. He knew much of it would end up in the trash because they always bought more than they could eat. "Sophia, let's play a game," he proposed suddenly. "What kind of game?" she asked, curious. "Let's look at what we have in the fridge and the pantry and plan our meals for the whole week. We'll only go to the store to buy what we really need. And at the end of the week, if we manage not to throw any food away, we celebrate," Ricardo explained. "And if we do, the prize can be making more sandwiches for Thomas and Marcus," Sophia suggested. "Exactly," Ricardo agreed, touched by his daughter's generosity. They spent the next hour taking inventory of their food and planning meals. It was the first time in years Ricardo had really paid attention to what he consumed. He discovered they had enough food for 2 weeks without buying anything new. "Daddy, look how much cheese we have," Sophia exclaimed, pointing to 5 different kinds of cheese in the fridge. "You're right. We could make a special dinner with cheese and share it with Thomas," Ricardo suggested. As they worked, Ricardo thought about his parents. His mother would be proud to see him teaching Sophia not to waste food. His father, who had worked so many extra hours to make sure his children had enough, would smile knowing Ricardo was finally understanding the difference between having enough and having too much. "Daddy, can I call Grandma and Grandpa?" Sophia suddenly asked. Ricardo tensed up. Since Elena's death, he had distanced himself from his parents. He rarely visited them, always with excuses about work and other commitments. The truth was, he felt uncomfortable in their small apartment. It reminded him of everything he had tried to leave behind. "Why do you want to call them?" he asked. "To tell them about Thomas and Marcus and how we're learning not to waste food." "I think Grandma Carmen would be happy," Sophia replied. Ricardo realized his daughter barely knew her own grandparents. He had created the same kind of distance he criticized in others. "You know what, Sophia? How about we visit them tomorrow and bring some of the sandwiches too?" he suggested. "Can we bring Thomas along?" Grandpa Miguel was a teacher too. "They could talk about teaching," Sophia said, excited. The idea of introducing Thomas, a man struggling financially, to his parents should have made Ricardo uncomfortable. But instead, he felt it might be a way to reconnect the worlds he had tried so hard to keep apart. On Sunday morning, Ricardo, Sophia, and Thomas got in the car and drove to East Portland, where Miguel and Carmen lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment. Thomas was nervous, wearing the cleanest clothes he owned and holding a bag with half of the sandwiches they had prepared. "Ricardo, are you sure your parents will want to have me over?" Thomas asked, uncertain. "I'm sure. My parents know what it's like to struggle to get by. They'll welcome you better than I did at first," Ricardo replied honestly. When they arrived at the apartment, Carmen opened the door and her face lit up when she saw Sofia. "Mi nieta! What a wonderful surprise!" she exclaimed, scooping Sofia up into her arms and covering her with kisses. Miguel appeared behind her, more reserved but just as happy. "Ricardo, son, it's good to see you," he said, hugging him. "Mom, Dad, this is Thomas. He's a new friend. He used to be a history teacher," Ricardo introduced. Carmen and Miguel greeted Thomas warmly without asking intrusive questions about his situation. Carmen, with a mother's intuition, sensed that something special was happening. Come in. I just made coffee and pan dulce," she said, ushering them inside. The apartment was small, but impeccably clean and full of family photos. Sofia ran to look at the pictures on the wall, many of which she had never seen before. "Grandma, who's this boy?" she asked, pointing to a photo of a young Ricardo. "That's your daddy when he was your age," Carmen said, smiling. "In that picture, he was helping at the church's community kitchen." Ricardo looked at the photo and remembered. Every week, his mother had taken him to help serve food to those in need. He had completely forgotten that part of his childhood, focusing only on the memories of financial hardship. "Daddy used to help poor people?" Sofia asked, surprised. "Yes, your grandmother taught me that no matter how much or how little you have, you can always help someone," Ricardo said, looking at his mother with new appreciation. Carmen hugged her son, feeling that something in him had changed. As they drank coffee, Sofia talked excitedly about meeting Thomas and Marcus, about Mrs. Chen's bakery, about learning not to waste food. Miguel and Thomas began a deep conversation about teaching, discovering that they shared very similar philosophies on education. "I always told my students that learning isn't about memorizing facts, it's about understanding connections," said Thomas. "Exactly. When I taught woodworking to young people at the community center, I always focused on how manual work connects the mind and the hands," Miguel agreed. Ricardo watched his father talking with Thomas and realized he had deprived Sofia of knowing this side of her family. Miguel wasn't just a construction worker. He was an educator, a mentor, someone who had dedicated his free time to teaching young people. "Dad, I didn't know you taught woodworking," Ricardo said. "You never asked me, Miguel replied, not reproachfully, just stating a fact. The truth of that statement hit Ricardo deeply. For years, he had avoided deep conversations with his parents, keeping visits short and superficial, focused on Sofia, but never on truly reconnecting. "Dad, Mom, I'm sorry," Ricardo said suddenly. "I'm sorry for pulling away, for being ashamed of where I came from, for not bringing Sofia to really know you." Carmen stepped closer to her son and held his face in her hands. "Mijo, we were never angry. We knew you were grieving Elena, trying to find your way. We just wanted you to remember that family isn't about having a lot or a little. It's about being present," she said, tears in her eyes. Miguel placed his hand on Ricardo's shoulder. "Your success has always made us proud, Ricardo. But what makes us proudest is seeing you teaching Sofia about compassion, the way you're doing now," he said. Thomas, moved by the moment, stood up quietly to give the family some privacy. "Thomas, you don't need to leave," Miguel said. "You're part of this conversation. Ricardo brought you here for a reason." Ricardo looked at Thomas and realized it was true. Thomas wasn't just a charity project or a lesson for Sofia. He was someone who, in just a few hours, had become important to their lives. "Thomas, my parents have an extra room. It's small, but it has a comfortable bed," Ricardo began. "Ricardo, that's not necessary," Thomas started. "Please, let me finish," Ricardo interrupted. "This isn't charity. You could tutor Sofia in history a few times a week. You could help my dad with his work at the community center. You could be part of our extended family." Carmen was already nodding enthusiastically. "Yes, we have space, we have food, and it would be wonderful to have someone to talk to during the day while Miguel's at work," she said. Thomas was visibly moved. I don't know what to say. You barely know me, he said, his voice breaking. We know enough, Miguel said. Any man who teaches a child about kindness by example is welcome in our home. Sophia jumped into Thomas's arms. You're going to live with Grandma and Grandpa? That means I'll get to see you more often, she exclaimed. Thomas hugged the little girl, letting his tears fall freely. It would be an honor to be part of this family, he said. In the weeks that followed, a remarkable transformation took place, not only in the lives of Ricardo and Sophia, but throughout the community around them. Thomas moved into Miguel and Carmen's spare room. During the day, he helped Miguel at the community center, teaching history and literature to at-risk youth. Twice a week, he went to Ricardo's house to give Sophia private history lessons, turning academic material into fascinating conversations about culture, society, and humanity. Ricardo used his corporate connections to secure medical assistance and housing for Marcus. The veteran began treatment for PTSD and found a part-time job at a veterans service center, where he helped other former soldiers navigate support programs. Ricardo's suburban home became an informal gathering place. On Sundays, he and Sophia prepared generous meals and invited Thomas, Marcus, his parents, Mrs. Chen, Donna Rosa, and other members of the community they had met through this growing network of connections. Sophia had become an ambassador of kindness at her school. She started a project where students brought extra snacks to be shared with people in need. Her teacher was so impressed that she expanded the project to the entire school. One Saturday, 3 months after that first encounter in the square, Ricardo and Sophia were once again walking through downtown Portland. But this time, instead of rushing by and avoiding eye contact with the people on the streets, they stopped to talk, to listen, to understand stories, to recognize humanity. Daddy, do you remember the day I asked about the man sharing his bread? Sophia said, holding her father's hand. I remember perfectly, sweetheart. That was the day our lives changed, Ricardo replied. Why did it take us so long to see? Sophia asked, with the surprising depth of a 6-year-old. Ricardo stopped and knelt down so he could look her in the eyes. Sometimes, Sophia, we get so focused on having more things that we forget to see people. We're afraid of losing what we have, so we build walls around ourselves, he explained. And now, do we still have walls? She asked. Not anymore, sweetheart. Now we have bridges, Ricardo said, smiling. They passed by Bread and Roses and waved to Mrs. Chen, who was busy serving customers. She smiled and waved back, shouting that she'd save some special loaves for them to take to Sunday's gathering. They kept walking until they reached the square where it had all begun. They sat on the same bench where Thomas had been sitting that rainy day. The square was now full of life. Families strolling, children playing, people sharing food in impromptu picnics. Daddy, do you think Thomas is proud of us? Sophia asked. Thomas is proud of us. He told me the other day that we helped him just as much as he helped us, Ricardo replied. Really? Sophia asked. Yes. You see, Sophia, when we help someone, we're not just doing them a favor. We're helping ourselves too. We're remembering what truly matters in life, Ricardo explained. Sophia thought about that for a moment. So when we share food, we're sharing love too, she asked. Ricardo felt his eyes fill with tears. Elena would have been so proud of their daughter's wisdom. Exactly, my love. Food is just food, but when we share it with love, it becomes something much greater, he said, hugging her. At that moment, Marcus appeared in the square, wearing a clean work uniform and carrying a bag. Ricardo, Sophia, what a coincidence running into you here. He greeted them with a smile. Marcus, how was your first day at work? Ricardo asked, standing to shake his hand. It was amazing. I helped 3 veterans sign up for housing programs today. One of them hugged me and cried with relief, Marcus said, clearly moved. That's wonderful, Marcus, Ricardo said, genuinely happy for his friend. None of this would have happened without you and your family, Marcus said. You gave me a second chance. You gave us a second chance too, Ricardo replied. A chance to become who we were meant to be all along. Sophia took Marcus's hand. Marcus, will you come to Sunday dinner? "We're making tacos with Donna Rosa," she invited. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Marcus said, smiling. 6 months after that rainy Saturday, Ricardo stood on the stage of a corporate event. But he wasn't presenting marketing strategies this time. He was sharing the story of how a single question from his daughter had transformed his life and sparked a movement of change in his community. "My daughter asked me, 'Daddy, why does that man share old bread while we throw food away?' And I had no answer," he told the silent audience. "Because for years, I had confused success with accumulation. I had confused protection with isolation. I had confused having more with being more." The audience was completely captivated. Many of the executives in the room saw themselves in Ricardo's story. We who have so much are often afraid to look at those who have little. Because when we truly look, when we really see, we're forced to question our own choices. Ricardo continued, "But you know what I discovered? Sharing doesn't make us smaller, it makes us larger. Every time we share what we have, we create space for more joy, more connection, more meaning in our lives," he said. In the audience, Sophia sat between her grandparents with Thomas beside them. She watched her father with immense pride. "Today, our company is launching a social responsibility program where half of all our profits will go toward hunger and homelessness initiatives. But more important than that, we're encouraging every employee to do their part, not just with money, but with time, with attention, with humanity," Ricardo announced. The auditorium erupted in applause. After the event, the family gathered outside. Miguel and Carmen hugged their son proudly. Thomas shook his hand with deep respect. Marcus, who had come to support his friend, smiled broadly. "Daddy, you were amazing!" Sophia exclaimed, jumping into his arms. "I learned from the best teacher," Ricardo said, kissing her forehead. "You taught me to ask the right questions." As they walked together down the street, now an expanded and unlikely family, a corporate executive, a 6-year-old girl, retired immigrant parents, a former teacher rebuilding his life, and a veteran starting over, Ricardo thought of Elena. He whispered silently, "Elena, our daughter has your heart. She sees the world through your eyes, and she's teaching me to see too." Soft, concluding music, Sophia looked up at her father as they walked. "Daddy, will we still remember not to waste food even when we're old?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart. But more importantly, we'll always remember not to waste opportunities to make a difference in people's lives," Ricardo replied. "And to ask the right questions," Sophia added. "Especially to ask the right questions," Ricardo agreed, smiling. Because in the end, it was a simple question from a 6-year-old girl that awakened the conscience of a man who had forgotten his roots. A question that reminded everyone who heard this story that kindness isn't about having a lot to give. It's about having a heart willing to share whatever we have. "Daddy, why does that man share old bread while we throw food away?" Sometimes the simplest questions carry the deepest truths. And when we have the courage to truly listen, to genuinely respond, we discover that the answer isn't found in words, but in actions. In the daily choices to see others, to care, to share not only what we have, but who we are. This was the story of Ricardo, Sophia, Thomas, Marcus, and all those